I don't remember when, but mornings stopped being a fresh start and became a burden. The first thing that hit me upon opening my eyes wasn't the morning light, but an invisible wave of fatigue. It flooded my mind, pressed down on my chest, making me just want to pull the covers over my head and disappear from the world. Day after day, I lived like a shadow. Work continued, but with no enthusiasm. Conversations with colleagues were just a few strange sentences, my eyes avoiding contact, my smile as forced as a worn-out mask. Friends drifted away because of my repeated refusals to meet up. My family couldn't understand what was happening, and I didn't know how to explain it because I didn't even understand it myself. I completely lost joy in the things that once made me happy. My favorite songs were now just hollow sounds. Delicious food couldn't awaken my taste buds. I used to love reading, but now each page was just a string of meaningless words that I couldn't focus on. Night was the cruelest enemy. I would toss and turn for hours, my mind like a movie in reverse, replaying all the failures, the mistakes, the words that hurt others. I turned from side to side, trying to find a comfortable position, but the only thing I found was the feeling of free falling into a bottomless, dark void. When the clock struck 3 a.m., my eyes still wide open, I knew I would start another day in a state of exhaustion. No one knew that beneath the shell of "I'm fine" was a silent battle I was losing day by day. I couldn't clearly describe what it was. I just knew that living had become so heavy that I started to ask myself, do I even need to continue? Those gloomy days just drifted by, cold and heavy, as if the sun had forgotten the way to my place, and I too began to forget what it felt like to be truly alive. Pressure never comes alone. It's like small stones. At first, just a few rolling into the backpack I'm wearing, seemingly harmless. But then, over time, they pile up one by one until I realize I'm dragging an entire mountain on my back. Work was the first stone. To everyone else, I had a stable position with a good enough income. But they didn't see the stressful, endless meetings, the deadlines piling up so high I couldn't breathe. My boss had high expectations, and my colleagues were subtly competitive. I always had to force myself to appear calm, but inside, a wave of anxiety was swallowing every bit of my energy. Family, what should have been a source of support, unintentionally added to the burden. My parents always wanted me to be stable, get married soon, buy a house, buy a car, like the children of their acquaintances. Those words weren't malicious, but every time I heard them, I felt like I was being reminded that I wasn't good enough, that I hadn't met expectations. I would smile, nod, but when my bedroom door closed, that smile shattered. Then came society, or more accurately, social media. Every time I scrolled through Facebook or Instagram, I saw friends posting pictures of their travels, shopping, promotions. I knew it was just the part they wanted to show, but my mind still compared. They've gone so far and I'm still stuck in the same place. The feeling of being suffocated didn't just come from the outside. Inside my head, a voice repeated relentlessly, "You're not good enough. You only disappoint people. Things will never get better." These negative thoughts were like vines wrapping around my heart, tightening with every beat. I tried to stop them, to distract myself, but the more I fought, the stronger they became. There were days I walked home feeling like the very air was thick and heavy. Every breath was an effort, every step a small battle. I began to understand why people call depression the invisible illness, because no one sees the wound, but it bleeds internally every single day. And I also understood that if I kept going like this, I wouldn't be able to carry the weight for much longer. That day started like any other, but it ended like a storm that swept away everything fragile I had left. In the morning, a project I had poured my heart and soul into for months was flatly rejected by the client. Their reason was simple. It doesn't fit our new direction, but to me, it felt like a punch to the chest. It wasn't just my efforts that were denied, but my self-worth was dragged to the bottom. Before I could recover, I received news that a close friend had suddenly passed away in an accident. The message from an acquaintance was just a few lines, but it was enough to leave me stunned. That loss was like a new knife, cutting into a wound that was already bleeding. That afternoon, my family and I had an argument. Words were exchanged, and harsh things were said before I could think. The disappointed look in my parents' eyes is an image I can't erase from my mind. As night fell, my room seemed to shrink. The air was thick. The ticking of the clock grew louder, each tick pressing deeper into my mind. I sat on my bed staring into the darkness ahead, a feeling of emptiness spreading through my body. Then that thought appeared again. At first, it was just a whisper. If you disappear, you won't feel pain anymore. I tried to push it away, but it came back stronger, clearer. End it. Nobody needs you. I started to imagine the relief of no longer existing. No more stressful meetings, no more comparisons, no more gnawing loneliness. Just eternal silence. Tears streamed down my face, and I didn't even realize when they had started. My chest felt like it was being crushed, and my hand trembled as I reached for my phone. I wanted to message someone, but then I stopped. Who would understand? Who would care? That night, for the first time in my life, I felt distinctly that I was standing on the edge of a cliff. Just one more step, and I would fall. But I didn't know yet that at that very darkest moment, something unexpected was about to happen. The room was pitch black, with only the faint light from my phone screen casting a glow on the ceiling. I lay still, not crying, not breathing heavily, no longer feeling the pain as before. Strangely, it was this lack of feeling that scared me. Before, when I was sad, I could still cry. When I was angry, I could still scream. But now inside me was just an empty void, like an endless universe, so cold that all thoughts and emotions were sucked into it and disappeared. I looked around. The desk was still cluttered with papers, the bookshelf still full, the clock still ticking steadily. Everything was still there, but to me, it meant nothing. This whole world seemed to exist behind a thick layer of glass, and I, the one standing inside, could only look without being able to touch. The sound of cars outside faded, and then disappeared. The room felt like it was swallowed by silence. My heart was still beating, but it didn't bring the feeling of being alive. It was just a mechanical biological function, like that clock, counting down to an endpoint. In my head, there were no more questions of why or how to get out. There was only one stark idea. End it so everything stops. The silence now wasn't peaceful. It was like standing in a giant cemetery where the only one still breathing was me, someone who didn't know why I still existed here. I just lay there like that, waiting for something, or perhaps waiting for nothing at all, just existing through the night. The night was pitch dark, without a single star, as if the entire sky had turned its back on me. Rain drizzled outside the window, each drop tapping lightly on the glass, creating a sad rhythm. I sat huddled in the corner of my bed, my arms wrapped around my knees, tears flowing as if they couldn't be stopped. My throat was choked up. Each breath felt trapped. I don't know how long I had been crying. In the darkness, my sobs blended with the sound of the rain, and the room seemed to shrink, squeezing me tightly. It was at that moment, when everything seemed to be sinking deep into a black hole of despair, that I suddenly heard a sound, not from outside, but from the depths of my mind. A gentle, deep, warm voice, as clear as if it were standing right next to me. You are not alone. I am here. I was startled. My heart skipped a beat. The tears were still flowing, but my breathing suddenly slowed down. I turned my head to look around. No one was there. Only darkness, the damp smell of my blanket, and the sound of rain. But those words still echoed, so warm that they made my shoulders tremble. For some reason, the fear inside me began to recede, like a wave pulling back from the shore. In its place came another feeling, very strange, both safe and familiar, as if I were being held in an invisible embrace. I closed my eyes, trying to hold on to that moment. A thought flashed through my mind, and I didn't know where it came from. Maybe someone is actually listening to me. That night, I didn't cry until I was exhausted like I usually did. I was still tired, still in pain, but amidst the thick darkness, a very thin ray of light had crept in, and I knew something had just changed. I sat there for a long time. I don't know how many minutes or hours had passed. The tears were still falling, but they no longer carried the weight that threatened to drown me. They were warmer, softer, and lighter. Before, every time I cried, it was an exhausting experience. My eyes would be swollen and red, my chest would ache, and my soul would feel like it was being torn apart. But tonight, amidst those tears, there was something different, as if each drop was washing away a part of the burden in my heart. I couldn't explain it. I just knew that in that moment, a gentle feeling enveloped me, like a soft blanket on a cold winter night. An invisible but tangible love, one that I knew was real without having to see it. I hugged my pillow tightly, listening to the rain falling outside the window. Each drop seemed to sync with my heartbeat, slower, calmer. In my mind, the words, "You are not alone, I am here," continued to echo. And this time, instead of doubting, I found myself wanting to believe. That night, for the first time in months, I fell asleep without feeling like an outcast in this world. I slept in tears, but they were a different kind of tears, tears that had been comforted. The next morning, when I opened my eyes, I still clearly remembered that voice, gentle, firm, and strangely familiar. It wasn't hazy like a dream, but was etched into my mind like a real memory. Throughout the day, I felt a compulsion to find out more. Who was that voice? Why did it appear at the very moment I was on the brink? The question kept swirling, urging me to find an answer. I opened my computer and hesitantly typed in keywords. Hearing a voice when desperate, someone speaking in my mind, God saving someone from suicide. A series of articles, videos, and testimonies appeared. I started reading, at first just out of curiosity, but the more I read, the faster my heart beat. There were stories that were eerily similar to mine. A girl in America who wanted to jump off a bridge but heard a male voice say, "You have a reason to live," and was then saved by a stranger. A man in the Philippines who planned to commit suicide but heard his name being called in the middle of the night. And when he opened his eyes, he saw the Bible open to the verse, "Do not fear, for I am with you." I sat in silence, reading every single word, as if I were drinking sips of water after a long, exhausting journey. For the first time, I considered the possibility that it could have been God. Not an imagination or a hallucination, but a real being who was seeing me, listening to me, and intervening in my life. That thought left me both confused and hopeful. If he had touched the lives of those other people, then perhaps he was also touching mine. That night, I didn't just cry for my own pain anymore. I cried because I realized, is it possible that I was never truly alone? That night, the room was as dark as ever, but I no longer just sat in silence, letting negative thoughts consume me. The stories I had read that afternoon, and especially that voice, "You are not alone, I am here," kept echoing in my head. I had never prayed before. I didn't belong to any religion, nor did I know the formal words people often use. But in my exhaustion and loneliness, I realized I had nothing left to lose. If that really was God, if he was real, then maybe he would listen. I whispered softly, almost afraid of my own voice, "If you are really here, please save me." Just a few short words, but as I said them, I suddenly felt a part of the burden in my heart being lifted. I didn't see a miracle happen instantly. No thunder, no blinding light. But something very small, very fragile, flickered inside me, like a tiny spark in a long-sealed room. That spark didn't chase away all the darkness, but it was enough for me to realize, maybe it's not over. Maybe I still have hope. I didn't know if this was the first step on a new journey, but for the first time in months, I told myself I would wait and see what happens next. In the days following that brief prayer, I still had to face the same old difficulties. Work was still stressful, the room still cramped and cold, and the nights still long. But something different was quietly happening. One morning, as I mindlessly opened my phone, a Bible verse appeared on the screen. I hadn't signed up to receive any, nor did I remember downloading any related apps. The verse read, "Do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand." I read it over and over, and it felt like someone was speaking directly to me. Then another day, as I was walking past a coffee shop, a song played from the speakers, a warm melody with lyrics that were like a whispered comfort. You are loved, you are worthy, you are not abandoned. I stopped, listened, and realized I was smiling, something I hadn't done in a very long time. The climax came one evening when I was feeling exhausted and planning to hide from everyone. My phone rang. It was an old friend I hadn't contacted in years, calling just to ask, "Are you okay lately? I don't know why, but I've been thinking about you all day, so I thought I'd call." I was almost speechless. All these things, the Bible verse, the song, the phone call, were small, but when put together, I realized I was being reminded. I was not alone. It seemed that the voice from that night wasn't just a fleeting moment, but that he was still here, quietly walking with me through the darkness. I had lived in my room for too long, four walls that seemed to shrink every day, squeezing my mind and heart. But after a series of signs, I knew I couldn't just sit still. One morning, I mustered all my courage and texted a friend whom I knew was a believer. The message was just a few words. "I want to meet you, to talk." She replied almost immediately, and just a few hours later, we were sitting across from each other in a small coffee shop. There were no dry sermons. She just listened to me, truly listened, as if every word I said was important. When I finished my story with a long sigh, she smiled gently and said, "You don't have to be strong alone. God wants to walk with you." That sentence became the first push. A few days later, I agreed to go with her to a small prayer group. I walked into a warm room where about 10 people were sitting in a circle. They didn't know who I was, but they immediately welcomed me with their eyes and tight hugs. When they started to pray, I didn't understand all their words, but I could feel something spreading in my heart, a peace as light as a breath. The next week I went back, and the week after that. Each time I felt the darkness inside me gradually recede, not because the problems disappeared, but because I was no longer fighting alone. I began to realize that this community wasn't just a place for religion to happen, but a new family, a place with hands ready to hold mine when I was weak, and laughter loud enough to chase away some of the long, lonely nights. Stepping out of the darkness wasn't a spectacular leap, but a series of small steps, one day at a time. And I was learning how to walk. There were memories that I had tried to lock away in a dark room in my mind for years, as if not touching them would make them disappear. But the truth was the opposite. They were still there, silently gnawing at me every day. One evening after the prayer group, the pastor sat next to me and asked, "Is there something you've never spoken about? The thing you're most afraid to face?" That question opened a door I had locked long ago. I started to speak, hesitantly, tremblingly, about the wounds, the betrayals, the mistakes that made me hate myself. At times, I couldn't hold back my tears. I was afraid of being judged, but instead, I only saw eyes full of empathy. The pastor said slowly, "You don't have to carry this burden alone anymore. Give it to God. He is big enough to hold all of it." That night, for the first time, I truly prayed with all my heart. "God, this is the pain, the shame, the things I cannot heal on my own. Please take them." As I spoke the words, I felt as if someone was gently removing the chains from around my chest. Not everything disappeared at once, but the long-held burden seemed lighter. I understood that letting go doesn't mean forgetting, but handing over the power to heal to the one who loves me more than I love myself. And as I stepped out of the dark room of memory, I found I had taken another step on the road to revival. The change didn't happen overnight, but was like the dawn seeping through a crack in the door, slow but sure. The heavy dreams and nightmares that used to torment me began to fade. Every morning I woke up, my chest felt lighter, as if a stone had been lifted from my heart. I realized I started to smile more. At first, they were awkward smiles, but they gradually became natural laughter when I heard a funny story or saw the sunlight shining through the leaves in the early morning. In our group meetings, I heard many people share their stories of loss, of suffering, but then of healing. Strangely, instead of feeling sorry for myself, I felt strengthened. I no longer saw myself as alone. One evening, as I was rereading my old journal entries, I realized the person in those pages, full of despair, withdrawn and tired, had gradually disappeared. In their place was the me of today, not perfect, but full of hope. I began to believe that God didn't just save me from the intention of ending my life, but that He was renewing me every day. The old wound still left a scar, but instead of being ugly, it became a reminder that I was saved, I was loved, and I still had a reason to live. At first, I didn't think I was brave enough to tell my story. Depression was a dark room I had locked up, not wanting anyone to see inside. But then, during an intimate chat with an old friend, I suddenly opened up. I told her about the nights my pillow was wet with tears, about the gentle voice that held me back, and about the journey of finding myself again. That friend was silent for a long time, then whispered, "I've been there too." Her words made me realize that there are so many people living with a pain they don't dare to speak of. From that day on, I started sharing more. On social media, I wrote short lines about hope and faith. In my fellowship group, I recounted my experience, without embellishment, without concealment. And strangely, every time I told it, I felt the wound in my heart being soothed a little more. I received messages from people I had never met. "Your story made me rethink my decision. Thank you. I don't feel so alone anymore." Each response was like a small lamp, proving that light can spread, even from a place that was once the darkest. I understood that the hope I received wasn't meant to be kept for myself. It was a gift that needed to be passed on so that someone, somewhere, could hear the call as I once did. Since hearing that voice in the darkness, I no longer see life as a series of days to endure. Every morning when I wake up, I whisper, "Thank you, God, for I still have breath today." Things that seemed ordinary, sunlight through the window, the sound of birds singing, a hot cup of coffee, have now become incredibly precious. I started to practice listening, not just with my ears, but with my whole heart. Sometimes it's a thought urging me to call someone. Sometimes it's a feeling that I need to stop and pray for a stranger. Many times I found myself showing up right when a friend was in despair or sending a message that they later said, "You just saved me from a terrible decision." My experience became a bridge to reach others. I joined a support group for people with depression, volunteering to listen and share. I don't always have the answers, but I know that presence and encouragement can be a ray of light in someone's night. God's guidance isn't always as clear as that voice was, but I feel Him through the small moments. An opportunity to help, an unexpected encounter, or an inexplicable peace when making a decision. And I understand that I don't need to know how long the road is. I just need to take it one step at a time, following His lead, because He saved me once, and He is still leading me every day. Many months have passed since the darkest night of my life, but that voice still echoes in my heart as if it happened yesterday. That voice, warm, firm, and full of love, not only saved me from the brink of death, but also gave me a reason to live, a new path to walk on. I used to think I was lost, useless, and had no future. But now I know I am loved, redeemed, and have a mission. Life is no longer just about existing, but a journey of learning every day how to live fully, love deeply, and give hope to others. I share this story not to talk about myself, but to talk about the one who touched me. If you are in the darkness, please know that you are not alone. Open your heart, even with just a faint whisper. If you are here, please save me. You might be surprised to realize He has always been there, just waiting for you to turn back. My life once hit the deepest abyss of despair, where darkness seemed to never leave. But then a gentle voice from above rang out, pulling me from that abyss and giving me a new life. Now every day I wake up as a gift, an opportunity to love, to heal, and to live more fully than ever before. I am no longer the person who wanted to give up, but a person who carries in my heart a flame of hope that will never be extinguished. I tell this story not to seek pity, but to tell you that no matter where you are, no matter how lonely you feel, you are not alone. There is one who is always listening, always loving, and always ready to save you. You deserve to live, to be loved, and to be healed. Let my story be a reminder that light always exists, even in the darkest of times. If you feel this story touches your heart, subscribe to the channel right now so you don't miss out on inspiring stories and shares that help you find light in the darkness. Together, we will create a community of love, sharing, and support on the journey of healing and finding hope. Don't hesitate. Subscribe, hit the notification bell, and let your journey begin today. You are not alone. We are in this together.